On today's show, we're not doctors, but injuries are at the forefront ahead of tonight's enormous games in the National Hockey League. We'll also get into the Utah Hockey Club no more. They're now a Mammoth team.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome inside this Wednesday, May 7th edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. Today I'm with Gil Martin from Locked On New York Islanders. Thank you to everyone for making us your first listen each and every day, all across the Locked On Podcast Network, where we have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. Of course, here on Locked On NHL, we take a big picture look at everything going on across the league. If you missed last night's games, NHL Game Night has you covered with immediate reaction from across the league. What a Stanley Cup playoffs it's been so far. And we'll have plenty of time to get into tonight's matchups between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. The Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars, both teams without their number one defenseman, we think. We'll get injury updates there for you. And of course, the Utah Mammoth are welcome to the National Hockey League. But Gil, I got to ask you, man, I haven't spoken to you since Monday. The New York Islanders win the draft lottery. You must be pretty excited about that.
Yeah, very surprising. You know, you go into the lottery with a 3.5% chance of getting that first pick, and somehow, you get that lucky number 13 ping pong ball coming out of the machine. Been very excited about it, talking about it extensively on Locked On Islanders, and a big break for this Islanders franchise.
And you'll be covering that over at Locked On Islanders for the next month and a half. The NHL draft will take place in Los Angeles on June 27th and 28th. Reminder, too, we've got Locked On NHL Prospects, our analysts, looking at everything. They have been all year. I know the draft's huge right before it, but our guys are in the mud of the prospect world trying to uncover the gems that help your teams get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. For example, in tonight's game between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers, you have 2 first overall picks, Aaron Ekblad and Austin Matthews. The Toronto Maple Leafs get a huge win, 5-4 in game 1 of this series, but it feels like every storyline coming out of it is the big bully Florida Panthers and a really questionable play that involved Anthony Stolarz, who has been ruled out for tonight's game, Gil.
Yeah, and that's big. Let's face it. And, the Toronto Maple Leafs have to go with their backup goalie, although, both Wall and Stolarz have played extensively this year, so it's not like somebody who's untested. But I still am shocked that there was no supplementary discipline on that hit.
For me, the reason why there wasn't is it was a real hockey play. It was on a power play, and he was trying to get to the net. I think his skates were outside of the crease, but he was just, I don't know. I think it's a reputation narrative right now with Sam Bennett, and there have been things he's done in the past that have been sneaky as well. So you don't give a guy benefit when he has had the little pop rabbit punch on Brad Marchand. Was that last year or 2 years ago in the Stanley Cup playoffs? And he's had moments even within this series where he's always playing on the line, if not over it. But I think in that play in particular, it's an awful result, but I don't think it's an egregious hit like, oh, turn your kids away from the TV when you see it. It's just unfortunate that it resulted in the way it did. That's also a very large man, 6'6", 240-pound Anthony Stolarz hitting the ice after that play. So you never want to see a guy get hurt, especially the symptoms that he was showing. My wife is in the medical field. She said, was he puking after getting hit in the head? That is like the worst case scenario. So we were ultimately surprised even that yesterday they weren't ready to rule him out for tonight. And teammates said they saw him at breakfast. He was in good spirits, but health comes first. Anthony Stolarz needs to be smart in terms of what his long-term future is going to look like. And they're going to be going with Joseph Woll tonight, who was thrown into an untenable situation, really, coming in cold off the bench. Still was able to get the win. Probably let in a goal or two more than he would have liked, that made the game closer at one point, a 1-goal game with 5 minutes left. But he has shown in previous playoffs that he can be a big game goalie. How do you think Stolarz' absence shifts the dynamics of this series?
I think it'll affect things emotionally in several ways. How are the Leafs going to respond? And will they go after Bennett at some point to try to send a message? Do they only do that if the game gets out of hand? Either they're way ahead or they're way behind. Can the team rally around Wall? I think emotionally it's going to be a bigger impact than maybe it will be on the ice. I don't know if the difference between the two goalies is that significant.
And with the emotional aspect of it, Matthew Nyes was asked about it after the game, and they said, and look, Ottawa pressured them the same way. Obviously, it didn't result in injuries, but Ottawa led the first round in hits, and Toronto was able to just kind of ignore the noise. Like in game one, Ridley Gregg got his stick up and cross-checked Tron Tavares in the face. They did not look for any retribution. And to me, that's the coach, Craig Berube, instilling that we are a talented team. We got to get out of the mud and just play our skilled game. And we might get some bumps and bruises and we might be sore afterwards, but don't look for a pound of flesh in return. Make sure to just take advantage of the power plays. And in game one against Ottawa, that's what they did. They went 3 for 6 on the power play. They also scored a huge power play goal in game 6 of the series as well, after a bit of an undisciplined play that put them on the power play. So Toronto's best retribution, Gil, isn't getting into altercations. I've seen a couple people say, put Ryan Reeves in the lineup, he'll take care of things. No, the best way that the Toronto Maple Leafs can use this type of game and series to their advantage is when they get the calls, make sure they're scoring on the power play. And I think they have done that so far. And they're going to have to continue if they want this series to be short and sweet after they got the game 1 win.
Yeah, no doubt. And first of all, I guess to sum that up, the best revenge is living well, right? So you go out there and you just take care of business and eliminate your opponent, and that's the best revenge. But is there a little irony in Craig Berube saying that after his NHL career was kind of built on physicality? And I don't know if I'd go as far as to say retribution, but certainly he sent more than a few messages during his NHL career.
Well, maybe that's the wise approach then of a guy who's lived and learned, right? Yeah. And he played on the Broad Street Bully teams pretty much, maybe a little bit after the heyday of them. But still, I mean, they had that mentality of being tough and being a team that you never wanted to cross. Otherwise, you'd feel it. But when you have a lineup that has William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, you can't rely on that style. You have to play to your team's strengths, and their strengths is puck movement. They have an elite ability at stretch passes out of their own end to create breakaways and odd man rushes, and they just need to focus on what's making them successful, because the Toronto Maple Leafs did a great job this past offseason of adding defensively responsible players that are no frills, no high maintenance players, no guys who you're wondering if they're going to be a hit or a miss in a game. You got reliable trees. We always talk to former NHLer Mark Mathod about how you build on the back end. You want trees, not shrubs. And in the past, it felt like the Leafs were trying to create a 5-man power play unit where they had a defenseman. Ironically, now they've just gone to 5 forwards on it. But think about these names like Tyson Barrie, bringing him in. And these are all good hockey players, but they just didn't fit. Having Rasmus Sandin, another great hockey player, Timothy Liljegren, guys who they went out and got, Cody Ceci. Like, they always try to get these puck mover two-way types. And then they're like, wait, our forwards are so good. If we can create separation from the slot in our own zone, we're going to be in a good spot. So the top pair of Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev, phenomenal. They block so many shots, so many lanes. It doesn't always show up on the score sheet, but what they do is huge. Sima Benoit's among the top hitters this postseason among defensemen. He's also had 2 key plays in overtime to get goals. So I know this is tough for me to say, Gil, with the Sens jersey in the background and some tissues on my desk from crying last week when the Sens got kicked out by the Battle of Ontario again. But you have to give credit where it's due. this team is different. And that's where I think that fans have clowned on them. This is their 9th straight year in the playoffs. They've only made it past the second round, or to the second round once, never passed it. And they've actually already matched their wins past round 1. They lost in 5 games to Florida 2 years ago. But I know I'm being long-winded, but it really does feel like this year's different because they figured out that the way to build their team isn't to just have everybody score. It's to know the players that are in their roles and doing what they do in them will help create success. So good for Joseph Woll. He's going into a situation where they're not giving up a whole lot of high danger shots. So he just has to be solid, not exceptional.
Yeah. And I think, part of it is that Toronto learned that they set their roster more geared toward playoff hockey. In the past, they had to make a big adjustment in the style that they played from the regular season to, the typical shut it down more, less time and space, more physicality in the playoffs. Now they have players who kind of know their roles and play the defensive style that you need to have in order to win in the playoffs. And I think it's a very smart way to construct the roster when you already have those talented guys at the top.
Meanwhile, for the Florida Panthers, how would you adjust your game after losing game 1?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think getting back to sort of what you said about the retribution and the physicality, I think the Panthers want to make this more physical. So I think I would come out and be physical and try to set the tempo of play that way, because I think Florida has a slight advantage in that department.
And we will see tonight, 7 o'clock puck drop between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. Florida had the shot attempts advantage, 59-33 in game 1. But as we've seen so far this series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, they do not care if you go in and try to just put weak shot attempts from the outside. They'll just block them. Get this, out of how many shot attempts did I say? A ton. It was 59 shot attempts at 5-on-5, 74 total shot attempts in the game, and they had 29 that actually got through to the goal. So if I'm Florida, I'm going, how can we get to dangerous areas against the Toronto Maple Leafs, because they have done a phenomenal job of making it easier on their goalie to just allow them to see the puck. So far this postseason, the Toronto Maple Leafs through 7 games, okay? So it's not like they've played more games, even though they played the first one of second round. Not everybody's done that. Gil, they've got 16 more block shots than any other team in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Will that trend continue tonight, or will the Panthers find a way to get the pressure on in Toronto for game 2 tonight? There's one other big game tonight between the Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars. It's game 1 of round 1 between the only teams in the National Hockey League that went to 7 games in the first round series and came out victorious. We'll preview that series next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or I just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, alongside Gil Martin from Locked On New York Islanders, the home of the first overall pick. I'm happy for you, buddy. I think that's awesome and gives you lots of content here coming down the pipeline. We love our draft rankings over at Locked On Senators. We'll be doing those starting in 2 weeks' time. It all culminates with a full first-round mock draft, a feature production. Cannot wait to put that together. And to learn more about all the prospects and how they've done throughout the season, check out Locked On NHL Prospects. We've already covered the Florida Panthers versus Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, you can check out Locked On Panthers, Locked On Leafs for more on those games. Tonight's matchup, though, that I'm going to be focused the most on is the Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars. Sure, partly because I live in Winnipeg right now, and that is an exciting thing happening around the city, but I just felt like the Dallas Stars were going to be a problem. So were the Colorado Avalanche. No matter what happened in round one for Winnipeg, it wasn't going to be easy, but what's your first impression knowing that this is the last series to get underway in the second round?
Yeah, I think this is probably, from a neutral fan's perspective, I think this may be the most exciting series out there of the four, and that's no disrespect to any of the other teams being involved. I just think this is such an evenly matched series. Both of these teams, even before the playoffs, if you were to list the 4 or 5 teams with, you would consider real cup contenders, these two teams had to be in there. And the rivalry, the intensity of this, and the way injuries are also playing a role in this series, I just think it's compelling.
And you mentioned the injuries. That is the storyline. Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson both missed all of round one with their respective injuries. It sounds like Heiskanen could be closer than Jason Robertson. Monday rather, Pete DeBoer says he doesn't know yet whether he'll be available for game one tonight. So we're going to keep tracking that. At the time of this recording, it is unknown whether or not Heiskanen is going to play against the Jets. That's obviously a huge, huge storyline. Questionable is the latest on Miro Heiskanen, and Jason Robertson, I think later on in the series is more likely. Practiced on Monday though, so we could see those two drop into the series. So I wouldn't go so far as Nathan MacKinnon and saying that that's the best forward on the Dallas Stars. I think that was a bit, whether tongue-in-cheek is the right word, I think more just frustration and easier to say after losing that game 7. Mikko Rantanen might want to have a word about that as the best forward on the team, but Heiskanen is, with a bullet, the best defenseman. And we might be without the best defenseman on both teams tonight, as Josh Morrissey only played 2.5 minutes of game 7, that marathon game 7. So the other 5 guys took a lot of the weight carrying through those 2 do or die extra frames. And even towards the end of the game where they came back 2 goals with the net pulled, crazy, crazy theater in Winnipeg. But no Josh Morrissey, no Miro Heiskanen on the back end. That certainly changes the dynamic of this series.
It does. And I got to give credit to the Winnipeg defense for the way they stepped up in the third period and definitely in the 2 overtime periods. You're missing a guy who takes a lot of minutes, who has a big role, and you manage to keep, the opposition off the scoreboard and hold on long enough to win. It's hard enough to play with 5 defensemen in a 60-minute game. To do it in a game that goes to double overtime is very, very impressive.
Yeah, Neil Pionk played almost 45 minutes in that game. Hayden Fleury, who was a healthy scratch at times this series, played 33 minutes in the game. And who else but the captain, Adam Lowry, up front to end it in double overtime. And he might have to continue playing in an elevated role because the injury we have not touched on yet is Mark Scheifele, who took an enormous hit from Braden Shen in the first period of the game 5 in Winnipeg, and then took another big hit moments later from Radek Faksa. So the thought was, is it a concussion? Sounds like it's not, because he's already back at practice and was skating in his typical spot on the top line at the morning skate. What a boost that would be. A lot of talk at the deadline, and especially in your neck of the woods. Brock Nelson was a guy that was being targeted in Winnipeg. Didn't end up happening. He goes to Colorado. Winnipeg stands pat down the middle of the ice. They end up adding a winger in Brandon Tanev, a defenseman in Luke Shen. But for Vladislav Nemestikov to step up and play top-line center in a must-win game and score the goal to make it 3-2 in the last 5 minutes of the game, that's one thing. But to ask him to do it again against the depth that Dallas has up front, I think would be a tall task. So they need Mark Scheifele to be back. And if they're going to win this series, he's got to be at his best, because the combination, Gil, it's one thing to have Kyle Connor in the lineup, but when Kyle Connor has Mark Scheifele on his line, he's an even better player.
No doubt. No doubt. And there's a chemistry there. There's a familiarity there. And I think that it makes a big difference especially over the course of a 7-game series.
Yeah, no doubt. What's your feel on this series? You got a prediction? I know it's tough with the injuries and the uncertainty, especially the uncertainty. We haven't even touched on Connor Hellebuck as the make or break factor in this 7-game set.
He's got to play better on the road, especially. He's so consistent during the regular season, but not during the postseason, and that is going to be a key. The other thing I was looking at, Winnipeg had the best power play in the NHL this year. They're going up against the 4th-rated Dallas Stars penalty kill. I think that the special teams is going to play a very big role in this series. You've got to slow down that Winnipeg power play.
And think about this too. The Winnipeg power play has been without multiple pieces for seemingly every game so far this series, right? Nikolai Ehlers and Gabe Vilardi missed the start. So Vilardi missed 4 games this series. Ehlers missed 5. Scheifele missed 2. Morrissey missed 1 pretty much. And Nemestikov played top line center in game 7. All that. And Connor Hellebuck had an .815 save percentage, and they found a way to win. And if they're healthy, they're going to be, I know people are picking the Stars quite a bit, but if the Jets can find a way to stay healthy, I know Dallas fans are like, what the heck? We're not healthy either. But that to me is, it's going to be a 7-game series either way.
I agree. And I said the same thing about Colorado, Dallas before that. I said, if any series goes 7, that's going to do it. And it turned out to be correct. I think this one's going 7-2. The Central Division is so tight and evenly matched, and there are so many great teams in there. It just made for some really compelling hockey.
Yeah, and the Jets, they took flight, if you will, right off the bat, winning 15 of the first 16 games they played this season, and they were able to carry that momentum to a President's Trophy. That one gets underway at 9:30 Eastern tonight. That's for on ice. And we also have some off ice news, multiple reports about the Los Angeles Kings, and the Utah Hockey Club is no more. It's the Mammoth. We'll discuss that next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. Make sure to like and subscribe all across the network to get the latest Monday through Friday, everything that's going on. We appreciate you guys making us your first listen. All right, Gil, the LA Kings. 4 years in a row, they make the playoffs. 4 years in a row, they get eliminated by Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers. But just recently, it was announced that Rob Blake, general manager, also NHL legend, mutually agreed to part ways as the GM. What's the latest going on off the ice in LA?
Well, we know that Rob Blake is out, but Luc Robitaille, the president of the LA Kings and another hockey legend out in LA, said that he expects Jim Hiller to remain the coach in spite of the fact that there will likely be a new general manager in LA. So they're pleased with what Hiller has done, even if the team can't seem to get past the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs.
That's so tough because you just see it as 4 first-round exits, and the Kings earned home ice this year. Were able to be an unbelievable team, the best home ice team in the National Hockey League throughout the regular season. But it's how far have you gotten? It's not about, excuses. We played Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, and Draisaitl has a point in like 100 straight games against LA. Yeah. Feels like every single, those guys torched the entire National Hockey League to an extent. It's not really that fair. And we saw Draisaitl score a huge goal and make a big pass over to McDavid that almost resulted in another goal last night. Like, those guys are playing the game on easy mode, but changes happened in the 80s when the Winnipeg Jets kept playing the Edmonton Oilers in the first round and other teams. Like, it's the way that the divisional situation works out. Look at Colorado this year, losing to Dallas in the first round. Doesn't mean they're not a great team. Now, the way it unfolded, you could probably make an argument that a coaching decision or two, most notably in Game 5 when they challenged the goal and then all of a sudden they go in the power play, they score again. That changed the entire momentum of this. Was that Game 3? Or I think it was Game 3, actually, not Game 5.
Yeah,
it was in Edmonton, and they were up 2-0 in the series, and it just completely shifted the momentum to the Edmonton Oilers. Also making the goaltending change, Calvin Pickard. He hasn't lost a game yet this postseason. Incredible. Stuart Skinner goes 0-2, but for LA, I just found it interesting that you'd give that vote of confidence to the head coach before hiring the general manager. We know that the storyline going to next year, if it doesn't start the way it did this year, is going to be about the head coach. So what are your thoughts on making the decision on the coach before the GM?
It's a little curious, I think. You don't want to tie the new GM's hand before they even take over and take the job. So obviously now whoever gets hired is going to have to work with the existing head coach, but you get the feeling that the coach's seat is going to be hot from day one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a phenomenal scene in LA because I do think they still have a great team. You just have to wonder when's Father Time going to catch up to Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty. Like, even though they have a lot of young pieces that are good and getting better, Quentin Byfield jumps off the page, Brant Clark jumps off the page, but if they rely as much as they did this year on Kopitar and Doughty, those guys have to make it another year forward in their careers, being able to carry the load. Okay, the Utah Mammoth. We know it wasn't their first choice. The Yeti trademark got destroyed because of the Yeti Cooler Company, but the Mammoth actually has a nice ring to it. What were your thoughts when the Utah Hockey Club officially evolved into the Utah Mammoth today?
I think once Yeti was off the board, Mammoth was by far the best of the remaining choices. I like it. I think there's a great opportunity for some logos and different things that you could market. And I just never liked Hockey Club, even though I know it was a placeholder. I think this is a good step forward. What are your thoughts on Mammoth?
I love it. And I learned today, Pilsy, my co-host at Locked On Senators, said, they're trying to bring back mammoths. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did, actually. Yes.
I just learned it, and I'm still
DNA.
trying to wrap my head around it. Yeah, with elephants, and they're trying to add more mammoth features to elephants. That's way above our pay grade here at Locked On NHL, but I thought that was kind of funny. We're going to have to transport a few into the Utah state if and when they're able to accomplish that. But jokes aside, I think the kits are great. I'm not the biggest diagonal name guy. I know they're keeping the Utah name for the away jerseys, but I think it's sharp. I like the color combination. I really like them adding the tusk to the U for Utah that they're going to wear as a shoulder patch on one of those jerseys as well. I just think it's well done. So credit to them. I think the NHL has been knocking it out of the park because what they've done is the new teams kind of have this new cool vibe to it. I think of Vegas, Seattle, and Of course, Utah here as the most recent examples. But then they're also allowing other teams to go back to their nostalgic logos at the same time that I think is a really good look. So when I look at the current NHL logos, to me, it's a really nice kind of mix, right? Like Ottawa, Anaheim, Buffalo, they all got to go back to their more nostalgic kind of 90s, kind of more, I think, classic looks. The Leafs too went back a little bit there. The LA Kings went back from their kind of modernized logo to a more retro one. So I think they're doing a good job of having some new, some old, and I do like a lot. I don't think there's a whole lot of bad logos left in the National Hockey League. So the Mammoth is going to fit in just right.
Yeah, I think they are. And then I think there's also, with some of the third jerseys where like the Avalanche are, kind of paying a little homage to the Rockies, as were the New Jersey Devils, who have their roots in that team. The Sharks paid a little homage to the Seals with one of their third jerseys a couple of years ago.
Carolina,
I think that also adds a nice little touch.
Yeah, Carolina loves their Heart for Whalers jerseys too. So no, it's all good stuff, man. I like the name the Mammoth, and I mean they must like the fact that they're going to be able to unveil these jerseys, drafting 4th overall after winning the second leg of the NHL draft lottery. So they're a great young team. I mean, I feel bad for Arizona hockey fans. As few and far between as they may be, there are passionate hockey fans in that market, and they suffered through years of rebuilding, and it feels like so many of their prospects now are ready to take the next step. And I'm going to be really intrigued because obviously it's a incredibly tough division they're in with Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas. You got to think the Predators are going to be better than they were this past season, finishing so disappointingly at the bottom. The Blues came on so strong in the second half of the season as well. You've got the Wild. They're in a bit of a transitional phase. We'll see if they can get pen to paper with Kaprizov, who I think is going in to the last year of his contract, if I'm not mistaken. They dealt with injuries this year. It's just like they're in, he's going last year's deal. That's going to be a phenomenal negotiation between Kaprizov and the Wild. But I mean, the Central Division to me is probably the deepest in the league. I might want to argue the Atlantic, the way that Montreal and Ottawa came on. Detroit, though, probably took a step back. Buffalo seemingly can't figure it out. But the Central just has so much high-end talent, it's hard to get in to that mix. But I think Utah could do it as soon as next season. So I'm glad that they've settled on something quickly. Like it wasn't like a 2-3 year thing, and then we'll get to it. No, the Utah Mammoth are here, and it's got a nice ring to it. The Utah Mammoth just rolls off the tongue nice. So I'm a fan.
I am too, and I, like you said, I do feel for Arizona hockey fans because they suffered through the rebuild and they saw all these young prospects being added to the organization, but by the time they actually start to play in the NHL and reach their potential, the team is no longer in Arizona.
Oh, it's too bad. They'll get a team back one day, but it's unfortunate it hasn't been there so far. And with all that, they've also got $22 million in cap space this offseason with only Nick Bukestad, Michael Carcone, and a pair of depth defensemen as unrestricted free agents. So could they make a splash in free agency as well? Those are stories we'll be following on Locked On Utah Mammoth, where you can go subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making us all your first listen each and every day. We've got local experts on biggest stories all across the podcast network. Just type in Locked On team name and you'll get directed right to us wherever you get your podcast. We're also free and available on YouTube. For more on the first overall pick and the GM search for the New York Islanders, you can go check out Gil Martin over at Locked On Islanders. I'm Ross Levitan over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. We'll pass it over now to another edition of Game Night coming after the Leafs and Panthers and the Jets and Stars right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.